am Sigal Segev, the Associate Director of the Copenhagen Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Leadership Seminar Series of the Copenhagen Center. The mission of our center is to empower young women, professionals, and academics in all the fields of communication to develop those who can become visionaries and leaders and make a difference in their professions and their communities. So we are delighted that you have joined us today for this seminar. Our speakers will provide you with knowledge you can use as you pursue your dreams in the field of communication. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Glenna Milberg, our host for today's seminar, who will introduce our speakers.
Hi, welcome everybody. We're excited about the topic today. You know, we're going to be talking about the impact of social media in the communications professions, and we are lucky that we have representatives from two different sides of the communication industry. We have Dawn Silver, who will talk about the use of social media and the impact of social media from the perspective of public relations, and Glenna Milberg, who will be talking about it from the perspective of the journalist. So without further ado, let me introduce first Glenna Milberg. She's co-host of This Week in South Florida on Channel 10, WPLG. She joined Local 10 in September 1999 to report on South Florida's top stories and community issues, and she's a regular contributor to Local 10's public affairs broadcast This Week in South Florida. After beginning her career as a print journalist for a travel and trade magazine, she made the jump to broadcast news in 1987, and she's covered all kinds of South Florida stories, including campaigns, crime, hurricanes, the Everglades. And she's traveled extensively to bring us stories on issues in other places as well, as Cuba, Ukraine, California, and Colombia. She's received many awards and honors, including Big Impact Award from Big Brothers Big Sisters of Greater Miami, and she was named a Woman Worth Knowing by Miami Beach's Commission on the Status of Women. She's a native New Yorker, so she's used to this weather. And she and her husband Michael have two daughters. And her passions include art, photography, working out, music, theater, dancing.
And social media.
And social media. And she graduated from the University of Florida with an English major and also a Bachelor of Science in Broadcast Journalism from FIU, where she was named Outstanding Broadcast Journalist. So welcome to Glenna Milberg.
I'm watching to see if it works. I want you to know I am paying attention. I'm just trying to do an experiment, but there's no connectivity in this room. Is there?
Oh, you need to
connect to the FIU secure Wi-Fi.
Do you want to
How do I do that?
Carlos try to log in your?
How do I do that?
You give your tablet to Carlos.
FIU Wi-Fi secure.
No, you need. Can you use your credentials, Carlos?
Well, let me see.
I just thought of a spontaneous great idea and it's not working.
Okay, so I will. Can you take that over there? Yeah. Okay, so next I want to introduce Dawn Silver, who is the Chief Operating Officer of BoardroomPR. He's also the co-chair of the firm's crisis communication practice. So as you can imagine, social media has a very important role in crisis communications. He brings 30 plus years of successful public relations and marketing management experience as a corporate executive with companies such as Duracell USA, Forster Manufacturing, Parkinson Sports. He regularly assists many of the state's top entrepreneurs, corporations, not-for-profits, schools, and law firms with crisis planning, reputation management, public relations, marketing, community outreach, online, and search engine marketing. He's a frequent speaker, moderator, and author on topics including how to handle a crisis in your business, how to design a crisis plan, and how to deal with media under fire, both traditional and social media. He's active in the community as a chairman of the board and marketing communications committee chair for organizations such as NAIOP, Legal Marketing Association, Legal Aid Services, Broward Partnership for the Homeless, and others. And he's a native Floridian where he has a bachelor's in marketing from Florida Atlantic University. So please join me in welcoming our two speakers today. So first, they will have a few remarks, and then we'll open it up to questions, and I'll moderate that.
Yes. So many of you in the room today are either studying journalism or public relations or general communications, and there's just so much that has happened over the past five to 10 years. Some of it was due to expansive technology, the introduction of social media, the explosion of the internet, and then also the economy. Some things have caused a lot of our traditional institutions to actually make major changes. That includes business and also the media. It's been quite difficult on the media, the realities of the economy, such that many newsrooms are very scaled down as compared to the way they used to be, especially in print media. So today, the consumer has a lot more choices. If we think about in PR, we're trying to figure out what channel they're watching. It could be Twitter, it could be LinkedIn, it could be Channel 10.
Definitely Channel 10.
Definitely Channel 10. It could be cable. There's so many YouTube. There's so many choices today, and it's a much more complex environment. So stations like at Channel 10, they're actually broadcasting their news across many additional platforms that they didn't used to broadcast across. And today, the public relations professionals are being asked to do a lot more. It's not just simply get to know the media, write a press release, wait for something to happen. It's just not that way anymore. There's so many other channels to broadcast across, and it's not one size fits all. A press release is just not the appropriate vehicle to be communicating through on Twitter or on Facebook or on YouTube. So people are looking for different experiences. They're looking for very quick. They want their news now. They don't want to wait till 6 o'clock. That's why your traditional media, they have put a lot more resources against their web assets as compared to either broadcast or their actual physical print. As a matter of fact, some of the papers across the country, one is the Times-Picayune in New Orleans, has gone to, I think they're publishing a physical paper only 3 days a week. And as we're seeing, if you take a look at the Miami Herald or Sun Sentinel, the major papers, they are getting thinner because businesses today are putting their broadcasting dollars across many other platforms. So it's a challenge to all of us to get it figured out, and the pace of change is amazing. So PR, what's PR? PR really is the brokering of your key messaging points to your various targeted audiences. All right, so traditionally, we did it through outreach. We might have joined an organization, even having lunch with somebody, or through a newspaper or a television station or a radio public affairs show. Those were our choices. Now there are a lot more. So we have essentially the socialization of the public relations field, which is making the job a lot more interesting, a lot of different directions you can take with your career, but also for the people in the business, a lot more challenging. And still today, firms like ours and then companies today, they're all trying to figure out where it's all going to settle and what the best mix is for them. So you want to reach your target audiences. How do you go about doing that? Well, you got to get to know them, right? And I've seen in networking events, they might give you their card, and I'm Don Silver, and I want to do PR for you, and they don't even know them. So in social media, constantly you hear engagement, and that's what we hear every day. So you've got to engage the audience. To engage the audience, you've got to learn about them. There's a lot of research being done. Also, there's instantaneous analytics, something you never had before. For a television station, they might have had to wait 3 or 4 months in the old days to find out what the ratings were. Today, on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook, we know what our ratings are immediately, right? Based upon the amount of engagement we have, the responses, the likes, and things like that. And we all learn that it's impossible to be monitoring your social media, although my 16-year-old son finds a way to do it 24/7. But not everyone can do that, especially people in business. So that's why you're seeing companies, a lot of amateurs, doing 20 posts a day of gobbledygook, of things that no one cares about. So like I said, you've got to really get in tune with your audience. You don't want to annoy them and have them unfriend you. And there's a lot of that going on today. And the social media platforms themselves are changing just very quickly. Very, very quickly. I'm a LinkedIn person. I'm known as an expert. LinkedIn and Facebook, we have other people in our firm. It's not my platform of choice, but it's very, very good. LinkedIn for business, for sure. On business to business, it started really with people looking for jobs or companies looking for new employees. LinkedIn is phenomenal for that. LinkedIn's more serious. It's less playful. No one cares what you had for lunch or if you just brush your teeth. I don't know if they care about that either on Facebook. So LinkedIn is pure business. Facebook, there are interesting things happening on Facebook now. Well, Mark Zuckerberg's trying to figure out how do I make money with this thing, right? The company's worth several $1 billion. Well, they're doing more sponsored content today, right? Because they've got to find a way. They can't do it for free forever. They've got to make money. So you're seeing more sponsored content. Well, what's happening with Facebook now? I was in a meeting last week with the digital marketing expert, who's my partner on digital media campaigns, and they said what's really interesting is the young people, like my son, are getting away from Facebook, and it's their parents that are remaining. We do PR for a Episcopal middle and primary school in Broward County, and we run their website. We run every aspect of their social media. We manage their website. We manage their media relations. We help them with their community outreach. So we're in charge of everything. So what we've seen is we're getting tremendous engagement from the parents, and which is really great. Now on the Instagram, which is more photo-centric and image-centric, we're getting a lot of engagement from the students. We have a volunteer photographer that is taking pictures every week at every event, so it enables us to put fresh content and fresh photos up on their site every single week, which is rare. As you know, some websites you see, they look the same as they did a year ago or 2 years ago. They're a brochure on the internet. So companies really do need to get away from that. So the career being in PR, there's so many different directions today. Content creation, being a great writer, never hurts in any profession. Very important. Understand how to take on the persona of your client or your company. You cannot write, these are just the facts, Jack. Right. You need to take on a persona. You need to have personality. It needs to be more brief. People want glanceability. They want to consume it quickly. And if they want to go further, maybe they'll click more. But they want it now and they want it quick. They're making a decision in sometimes a second or 2 seconds. So if they see gads and gads and gads of just copy, they ain't interested. They're not going to do it. Or if they see you're disrespecting their time, they're not going to be doing it. So back to the images, well, hey, videographers, video editing, photographers, journalists get how to get what they need out of a subject. A lot of times with companies, you'll hear people say, well, they're clueless. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing because they don't have a staff that is comfortable, a qualified staff that's comfortable interviewing them, keeping an eye on the metrics of what's going on in the social media, and then giving the audiences what they want. Another key thing is you have many times you have different audiences. A company may have their stockholders. They might have government regulators, customers, employees, the public at large. That's 5 audiences. Do you communicate with all 5 audiences the same way, with the same timing? No, you don't. You have to customize it and give them what they need, or you're not going to capture them and someone else will. Glenna.
Yes. That was interesting.
Thank you.
We have such different positions and such different reasons. Can we make this a bit interactive?
Yeah.
Because I talk to a camera all day and I love this. You all are beautiful, really. I just tried a little something. Who's on Twitter right now? Anybody? Nobody? Seriously, it's okay to be on Twitter here. This isn't a class. This is no class. If you are on Twitter, my @ is Glenna on 10. Can you be on it in 30 seconds? 29, 28, 27. Watch, this because this is going to be important. 26, 25, 24, 23.
These guys' thumbs are much quicker than that.
19, 19, 18. GLE at GLENNA on ON 10. 18, 17, 16, 15, 14. This is my grand experiment from before. Okay, raise your hand when you get the answer. Yay! 30 seconds was just an arbitrary thing by me. I just wanted to be. Okay, so if you're on it, you'll see that except for getting on the secure Wi-Fi, which doesn't count, in a matter of seconds, I communicated with you, and you probably didn't even know it at the beginning while Don was talking, which I think is the clearest example of what social media is about. Bam, it's right now. And in a communication business, whatever your communication business is, that immediacy is mind-boggling. For those of us that didn't grow up with it, like most of you had, is anybody here over 27 years old? Everyone who's laughing is, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's it. I'm not asking anyone's age, I'm just saying there are 4 people in this room who have been alive longer than I've been on the air. I've been on the air 27 years. So, in that 27 years, the TV news has always been an immediate kind of medium, but with social media, it's now, it's right now. And I've, in the past 6 months, actually broken a national story on Twitter without having to wait for the 6 o'clock news. And in one respect, that's unbelievable. That is a breakthrough for my business. And in another respect, it's so daunting because social media has become a giant double-edged sword. So before I launch into what that's all about, I want to hear from just a show of hands today. How many people are journalism-oriented here, as opposed to PR? I mean, I just want to understand who our audience is. So just a few?
We have a couple different majors.
But just broadly journalism, like print or broadcast or news-oriented journalism students? Or are you just shy? Hey, thank you, okay. Now we're talking. And who does PR, more communication and sales? Oh, so this is your audience today. Okay, so you back there, we'll talk. So, I'm kidding. So to me, breaking news is something that is happening as we speak. So I want to know from you, where do you get your news? And you don't have to be a journalism student to say that. So who here reads the paper still? This morning you got up and you're looking for your news. Who went to the newspaper? And yes, newspaper, actual newspaper.
Or online.
Who went to the newspaper online or a newspaper online? An app, okay. Why 7? No, your 7's demographic.
People comes up on your market or whatever you have, your applications on iPhone, it's like one of the first that come up.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I don't have anything to do. That's a whole department that we have, our marketing sort of social media department. But that's important. And I guess for in the PR and sort of marketing areas, where your social media is placed is huge, because you Google, when I Google someone's name in the beginning of my research for any story, whatever comes up in the first couple, of course, is what I go to first. But I've gotten to the habit of going to page 10 to find the stuff that no one else is going to know, which is an interesting tool. But anyway, so I want to talk a little bit about the immediacy of news and what a double-edged sword that is turning out to be. On a scale of 1 to 100, sometimes it's a slam dunk 100. In the terms of credibility and care and responsibility, sometimes it hovers around 2 or 3. And that is a very important topic and trend in the news business. How many people are on Twitter or Insta or even, I don't know, who else breaks news? We have YouTube sometimes. Snapchat. Okay, Snapchat is more of a social thing, not a news-oriented, right? Oh, right, okay, and Videolicious, the little updates and video. Do you do Videolicious at all? That goes to our website. But when you go on there and you see something breaking, do you believe it?
Depending on the source.
Thank you. Depending on the source. That's a critical answer, because in the news business, to develop credibility, one little word at a time. I can have 27 years on the air with a responsible reporting and credible reporting, and the day I screw that up by reporting something I just saw on Twitter to get it out first, and it turns out to be wrong, and whatever the consequences of that may be, that's the day I lose your credibility, my credibility, and your faith in me. And so social media has, be it Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or web links or our own feeds on our website, that has ramped up the utter scare of doing things right and doing them first. And that's the order I go in all the time. I do things right before I do them first. Much to the chagrin of my producers sometimes, who wants it now. If it's not right and it's on there, you have lost. And so to the several people here who are budding journalists, it's a really critical component as you go through your, you are much better at social media than we will ever be. And that's true, because it's sort of in your DNA. I mean, imagine, I didn't have a cell phone when I started reporting. Huh? What? A cell phone. I didn't have one. And I will be very honest with you, I don't even remember how I reported without a cell phone and Google. I don't remember how to do that. And I am a public records queen. I can do public record searches, but those two things have changed the world in reporting. So this immediacy and credibility go hand in hand. And if there's one message in this short time we have together that I can tell you is, who here has a tool that they possess called common sense? And you're laughing, but to me, that is the critical tool you need when you use social media. And I'm talking in news. I tell I have 2 daughters, that's for life. Your common sense in your life is your tool. And so it's so easy to get on, punch it in, and hit send without it going through the common sense check. We've seen that, haven't we? I see those nods. And especially in the professional world of the news business, there have been instances at my station, not with me, thankfully, yet, but with some of my colleagues that have done things with a critical absence of common sense that has been, the consequences have been horrible. I'll tell you about them if you like. They're not that important at the moment, but in as you report, as you communicate, the common sense component of what you do, and that goes back to being right instead of being first, is critical. Good morning.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you. What are you doing here?
Asked at FIU. My students are here.
Wow. We go way back.
We miss it.
Thanks. So we're talking about social media. So I want to tell you a quick little story about, does anyone know who David Rivera is, former congressman? Okay, so David Rivera is, and I'll just give you the background to just give you my really quick little Twitter story of breaking national news. David Rivera is a former congressman. He just lost his seat, and he has been involved in some scandals, never been charged with a crime, has never been formally charged with a crime, but has been implicated as an ethically challenged man, and everybody has been talking about certain scandals he might have been involved with. And actually, the Miami Herald, a couple of Miami Herald reporters who dogged him have found evidence to back that he did some things criminal in a campaign. And that's all you really, if you don't know more, that's all you need to know for this story. So one of his alleged accomplices was caught and went through the federal court system, where there are no cameras allowed in federal court, and took a plea. And she took a plea, and everyone believed that this plea deal probably involves turning evidence on this former congressman. So in one particular court instance where there are no cameras involved, it was just a setup for what was to be her trial. And I said to my producers, hey, if I'm going to cover this trial, let me just go sit in this hearing. It was a 5-minute hearing. It's nothing, a status hearing. Let me just go meet the players and get my feet wet. And they said, oh, we need you to go do this. Some cat was stuck in a storm drain or something, I don't know. I said, listen, I'll be out before the morning meeting is even done. It's good for me. I just need to know. I'd like to wrap my head around things. So because no other reporters were there, because they all thought what my producers thought, it's kind of a 5-minute nothing hearing. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching what's going on, and I start to get the sense something's going down. And it was the day she took the plea, which was a huge surprise, but there was more. And during this plea, and I'm just sitting in the back row of federal court thinking, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It's my story, a national story sitting in my lap, and nobody else was there. Okay, what do I think? If I tweet it out now, everyone's going to know before noon, and I have a noon broadcast, I can have it exclusively. That's what I thought. But I'm watching, and they started reading what's called a colloquy with the prosecutor's presentation. And in the prosecutor's presentation, there was a co-conspirator that was never named. And the judge wanted to know who that co-conspirator was. And they're wrangling back and forth. Did they name him? Did they not name him? And the judge said, I order you to name the co-conspirator. And the co-conspirator was named as, guess who? Yeah. So right there in front of my face is the first time David Rivera, former congressman, was named in a federal lawsuit as a co-conspirator. That's a bombshell in the political world. You don't look very impressed, but trust me,
So
it
the
is.
tail was wagging the dog.
So I sat there on my little Twitter feed with actually I don't type with my thumbs, I do it with these, and I went like this, and I looked at it, and I looked at it again, and I looked around, and I'm thinking, the common sense filter is always there. Do I do this? What's the consequence? I break the news, bam. And then I left, and the thing was over, and I ran outside, and then my photographer was waiting because we had interviews to do. And in the next 20 minutes, every reporter in town came running up to the sidewalk in front of federal court. How did you know? How did you know? How did you know? And of course, how I knew was just a fluke, because it was actually good reporting on my part. I wanted to be there, and it was luck, and it was social media. And I was thinking later that day, to me, that's a big deal. I have a passion for what I do, so in my world, that's a big deal. And I was thinking later that day, if social media didn't exist, how would that have played out? I would have called my station. No one else would have known. We probably would have had it hugely exclusive on the 6 o'clock news. And no one would have known that until 6 o'clock that night. And to me, it's mind-boggling in this day and age that people wouldn't know things for hours. What? We know everything like that, right?
I have a question. You said huge and exclusive.
That was a terrible use of an adverb. I apologize. I'm talking.
So back when there wasn't social media, if you found out the news at 10 a.m., you would tell your station. How would you have known that someone else maybe didn't know about it and could have reported?
Because I was the only one in federal court. There was nobody else there. No, actually, that's a good question. Unless one of the attorneys had a source at another station, would have called another station. That's true. That's true.
If you would have waited until the 6 o'clock news, you could have risked someone else.
There was no other place to put it. It was my point. Where would I go with that? I could call my mom if I wanted, call my friends, but there was no way to broadcast that to my audience.
Would that not ever break into regular scheduled programming?
That would not. No, we break in for disasters and things that people need to know immediately. In other words, we break in with chases on I-95 more because my producers love chases, but I think that's because they get ratings. But in a larger sense, that is a public service because people drive all the time. So if there is a chase with armed people on I-95, I think that is a legitimate reason to cut in and let people know right away. But so, to Don's point, there are different platforms. There is Facebook, and I know Facebook that used to skew very young is now skewing older, and I know that just anecdotally because my dad has a page and he's 80. And there's Twitter, there are blogs, and I encourage anybody here who is a writer who wants an audience, even if it's going to be after you graduate, do a blog. Get your voice out there, because it's all you need. This is all you need to broadcast. I actually, with what the apps that exist and connections that exist, I can be anywhere in the world and do a report and a live shot on my phone all alone with nobody else. I can be in Bangladesh, and if there's a cell signal, I can do a live report from my station that you will see on Channel 10 just like this. I mean, think about that. So if you are serious about what you want to do for a living, and I always say the news business is not a business to be in if you don't love the news. It's not. It's a very tough life. It's a sacrifice in a lot of ways. If you love it, if you want it, and there's a passion for it, there's nothing else you can do that's going to make you happy, unless I haven't found it yet. But if you are serious about this, get it out there now. Start building your audience now. Even if your audience is within, this school, have a voice, have a take, be credible, be responsible, be interesting, have a personality, which you all do. Let that personality show, because social media has just ramped up your ability to fly as a broadcaster. Know your platforms, be it Insta, which is Instagram, photos. Can't do Instagram without photos, but photos can tell a story. Any photojournalist will tell you one photograph, one Pulitzer Prize-winning photograph can tell a story of a lifetime. Video, YouTube, Vine, be interesting. If you're not that interesting, make sure your video is and your nat sound is. It's okay, exploit your own strengths. Not everybody has the same strengths. Not everybody is a performer. They're not. And not everyone is comfortable being a performer. That's fine. Make your story tell the story. Make your video tell the story. What other platforms are there? Words, photos, web links. What I do, I'm going to tell you, and I'll end with this because I know you have a lot of questions. How I use social media, very different reasons. I promote my stories, like right before we go live or during the day. I'll either put up a photo, I'll quote someone if it's an interesting quote. We call it teasing. I will tease my story. I will try to get my audience on Facebook, and I use it all, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, to want to tune in to our broadcast later in the day, or to want to stay with me on social media during the day. So it's a tease. Sometimes I will tell the story. There's an app called Videolicious. I can get video, I can do my own little editing with a couple of strokes, I can introduce it, hey, this is what I'm doing, look, this is where I am, look at this story that just happened, this fire, this is a 40-year-old, house, whatever, bad electrical, blah, blah. Hit send, and it's on my website. So if you go on the website or on my social media where I post it, you'll see my story like that with video and all. So, that's one way. Immediacy, breaking news we talked about, I can report in real time. A huge social media application, reporting in real time. The love of my life. I never thought when I got into this business I could report in real time, except like right now talking to you. It's great, it is. And I'm sorry if I'm excited about it, but the subject of social media, reporting in real time for someone in the news is just like the Super Bowl every day, as long as the story's good. And then, after the fact, I do this show on Sunday. I co-host with Michael Putney. We have a public affairs show. Did anybody watch it on Sunday morning, 11:30? That's anyone under 40 that watches it?
Excuse me.
No, I'm telling you, it's okay to. Listen, I'm 50-ish. It's perfectly good. It's perfectly. Age is awesome. And to your point again, there are different demographics who do different things. Our show on Sunday morning is a very smart show. I wish. And my goal is to have a wide demographic of people watching it because it's very smart, it's very in-depth, or we try to make it, that's our goal. And so it's my favorite thing that I do now because it's different and it's smarter and it's a challenge. I've brought social media to that show. My co-host has been doing that show on his own. It took a very different form. It was like a real talking head show. We want to make it more telegenic. We bring in a lot of guests, a lot of different voices, a lot of different video, and we've made it very interactive. So when I'm on the air from 11:30 to 12:30 on Sunday, I have this, and people tweet me watching, and I can answer them during commercial breaks because I can't think and talk and tweet at the same time. I'm not that talented yet. But during a show, it's interaction in a show with my audience. What? That is huge. And it shows me, first of all, it teaches me things because we have a very smart audience and they want to know something that I hadn't asked. I'll say, Dan in North Miami Beach just tweeted me. He wants to know what you're doing about this in your city. That means you all can interview my guest. That's good, right? That's mind-boggling. Maybe not to you, it's mind-boggling to me. And so that's another way to use it. And then after the fact, when my stories during the week or when my program on Sunday is posted to our web, I take the link, I make it a little shorter in that website that you can make links shorter so you don't take up 140 spaces. And I put it up on Facebook and Twitter, and I usually write something like, the link is up, watch This Week in South Florida today. So anyone who's at brunch at 11:30, like who watches TV at 11:30 on a Sunday besides all the people who like talking head shows, you can watch it at 7 o'clock Sunday night. You can watch it tomorrow morning. You can watch the one from 2 months ago. You know, we had Jeb Bush, who is probably going to be a candidate for president. We had him first, huge coup in my shop. Right now, you can go watch that interview that we did last month because it's here. So social media has allowed me to tease and beforehand and report real time and interact real time and then go back and promote after the fact. It's the best thing that's happened to news since sliced bread, if you have the common sense and you use it right.
Glenna, wouldn't you liken it to?
Oh, wow.
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 She is.
Having a Sally Fields moment.
Wouldn't you liken it to, it could be viewed as being risky to have call-in on a live television show?
Oh, yeah, we don't take calls.
Right, but you're able to do it with Twitter because
Yes.
you can go through it.
Excellent point, right.
So
that's
it's
right.
really not much different than someone calling into a radio talk show.
Except you can filter it.
Correct.
Yes,
Or
absolutely.
someone says something off color or inappropriate, you
Right.
ignore it. So that's really
I usually
good.
don't ignore anybody. I always answer.
Well, thank you. I mean, those are really interesting perspectives. So while the students come up with their questions, I wanted to ask, to share kind of your perspectives in the case of a crisis, right? Because when what a company or a PR person considers a crisis is usually news, right? The news, and there's kind of the PR professional and the news professional have different missions in that situation, right? One wants to get as much information as possible. The other wants to frame the situation so that it's less, to reduce damage to their.
For that reason, I've always been fascinated that those two disciplines are in the same college in most universities because they're such different industries. I've always been
but
fascinated.
require a lot of similar skills. But in terms of communicating eloquently, right? And so I don't know. Maybe tell us from your perspective in a moment of a situation where new information is leaked or something that makes an organization look badly, or something happens like an accident or a plane crash or something like that. How is social media a blessing or a problem from the PR perspective and from the news perspective?
It's lack of control, basically. Before you had some level of control when you're dealing with a finite number of the media. Today you have all the social media, and then you have the review sites like Rip Off Report and Yelp, and not everything you read is true.
Correct.
So, for example, we represent a homeowners insurance company, and it's my job to deal with their Yelp and Rip Off reports, and someone would come on with 2 pages. Well, we had a flood, and we think it's $800,000, and they think it's $5,000. You get this all the time. So what our job is to A, make sure we contact them, let them know we're going to look into it. B, we want to know the facts, because in a company there are many different departments that might handle that, which sometimes takes some time. A lot of times takes a day, probably, to get the facts. So then we learn that an insurance adjuster has been out there 2 different times, and that the house is old, wasn't well maintained. It's a wreck, and the flood didn't cause the house to be a wreck. It was just a wreck. It wasn't maintained. So somewhere you try and take the conversation offline with the customer, the insured, and you try and reach something within the guise of the policy that makes sense to the company and to them. There are things that are covered and aren't covered, and most of us do not know how to read an insurance policy in full, and I don't, and I represent about 10 insurance clients, so they're very technical. So,
And in the meantime, there's social media going, this company's terrible, this
Correct.
company's terrible, this company's terrible.
Correct. So what we will do is we want to make sure we encourage our clients to tell their side of the story. We are looking into this right now, and we'll report the facts later and do everything we can, because that's what we do. We're here to do business. We're not here to take advantage or screw our customers, so to speak. So we take it offline. We try and work it out with them. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. I've seen, I spoke to someone yesterday, they did bathroom remodeling and someone was just blasting them everywhere they could and they wouldn't stop. And they ended up giving them a new bathroom for free. Anything just shut them up because this person was the subcontractor for Home Depot and they couldn't afford to lose Home Depot. So sometimes the consumer or the ultimate customer is right and they have a bone to pick and it's legitimate, and sometimes it's not. Because I get all the time, I hear from TV stations all over the state, and you know what? Most of the investigative reporters are really good reporters. They're supposed to be. In many instances, if there's nothing to it, or we can show them, here's the documentation. This is how many times they were visited. We got estimates, we did all the right things, but they're still screaming. Most of them kill the story. I've also called investigative reporters. I have one in Boston that was investigating a charity that I represented for 17 years. Someone took over the charity, their numbers weren't good in terms of the percentage they spent on actually delivering the charitable services versus the money they spent on raising the money. So this reporter was outstanding. We totally cooperated with them. He said, is it true, Mr. Silver, that this? Yes, it's true. Is it true that? Yes, it's true. So I cooperated with him. I saw the story. The charity got blasted. You know what? But he did his job. He did his job. He went out of his way to exhaustively get all the facts to give the company or the charity the opportunity to respond. They chose not to. We offered a statement, and I called him after the story and complimented on the story, and he said, you're the first PR guy that ever called me when it was a negative story on their client. And I did, because he did a good job. That's all we can expect them to do. It's our job to present the facts and the supporting information and sources that meet our point of view.
What about from the journalism perspective? How does discourse or exchanges in the public, on social media,
Sure.
do they ever inform stories or set agendas?
Informed stories, yes, because it is a legitimate source of information, although the information needs to be vetted and be made credible before we would broadcast it. And it depends on what the crisis is. And, from an insurance point of view, I can't even imagine we would cover an insurance crisis. That's a consumer issue. But a crisis like a plane crash, like, I think my first crisis that I remember in news was the Tylenol crisis, where there was tainted Tylenol. That I was just...
They read about it in the text.
Okay, yeah, I was sort of a cub reporter when that happened. That's a crisis. When you get down to what news is and what a reporter does, and sometimes it's hard to tell when you watch local news these days, and I totally get that. But what a reporter is essentially is a public voice, a public protector, and a government watchdog on behalf of the public. I am the public representative. I do that public service. That is what our job is supposed to be. So a crisis could be something unfolding right now where people are dying, earthquake, plane crash, whatever. A crisis could be Tylenol, tainted, a drug tainted that is unfolding in a very curious and confusing way. And we don't crisis manage, we crisis report. Crisis management is for someone else. And I will tell anybody who tries to control the media, really good reporters cannot be controlled by anything other than the truth. The truth is what controls me. Spin doesn't control me. Someone else's boss doesn't control me. Mine does, only because he pays my bill and keeps me employed. And sometimes I don't like that either, and he knows that. But a true journalist is someone who advocates for the public by way of finding the truth. And so here's your crisis. My job is to find out very simply who, what, where, when, why, and how. That's the first line of questioning for every story. Those are the facts, untainted, unabridged, unfiltered, no dispute, no one's morality. Morality is a very personal thing. Everyone here has their own morals based on their own lives. Ethics is a very different thing. Ethics is what we all share in common. Ethically, I need to say who's involved, how did it happen, why did it happen, the wear and the Tylenol, wear is universal. So those critical basic questions come first in a crisis to get the information out, to protect people, to give them what they need to know. And then after that, we start looking into especially the why and the how. The why and the how can go so deep and have so many moving parts. That's where the real work comes in. And in a plane crash or tainted drugs, who's responsible? Is it a company that's fudging safety to make more profits? That's a story. Is it the airline mechanic who somehow needs glasses and missed that loose bolt? That's a story. So you see, it could go so many different ways. My job is to critically, as quickly as I can, find out for the public, why is this happening?
And how important is social media as a tool in that process?
Okay. You know what? Thank you for putting me back on track. Social media in a crisis is ablaze with eyewitnesses, with rumors. So how do you know there's an eyewitness? I see a tweet. Someone is there. How do I know that they're telling the truth? Well, if they're showing a picture, that helps because I see. But wait a second, what if that picture is lifted off somewhere else and retweeted? So Twitter, Facebook, social media is a totally not credible source of reporting, but could be a wonderful tool for me to go find them. I tweet this person with the photograph. Where are you? Who are you? Call me. They call me. If I can vet that person and I trust that person, inconclusively is not an option. I need to have absolute conclusive proof that someone I'm using is on my air for whatever reason is factual. If it's an eyewitness, and I can prove that, I can use that person for an eyewitness. What do you see? What do you hear? Not what do you know, because they don't know. What do you see? What do you hear? That's a witness. If I have a witness telling me, I see this blast and I saw this guy running, it's an Asian guy in a red suit, that must have been who it was. I heard a blast. Period, the end. Right? So this, and now let me turn it back around on people watching. As you're watching Twitter to watch some unfolding news, you're seeing all of this as a news consumer. Now put yourself in a consumer place, because we're all news consumers too. Put yourself in the consumer's place. What do you believe? Are you going to retweet, oh my God, I just heard this? You see the haters on Twitter all the time, right? More than anything else. But that is just such a clear example of how important it is to employ the common sense.
So I'd like to open it up for student questions if you have.
I have a question for PR. I wanted to know, as an agency, PR firm, the people I guess you could say your customers, do they look for you? Do corporations, let's say, for example, Target, when they had their scandal of people hacking in their customers' credit cards, would Target already have a PR agent, or would they look out, or people branching to them like, hey, let me be your PR?
Well, a large company like Target has a sizable internal department, and they may use several different agencies for different purposes, including crises. So big corporations typically have voluminous crisis plans. They're supposed to practice it. They're supposed to have their spokespeople selected. They should be media trained in advance. They should practice the plan. And sometimes they'll go and hire. I got a call yesterday. Well, they have a PR firm, but a lot of people think that whoever they have isn't up to it. That happens a lot. Or they just want someone with that's not too close to them, that might have a more objectivity. So sometimes being too close to a situation is a little dangerous sometimes. Other times it's actually better because you might understand something like the insurance business. I understand pretty well. It's very complex. You get a general assignment reporter trying to cover an insurance matter, they don't understand it, and unless they rely on good sources to say, what do you think about this, someone that's trained? And I'd like to clone Glenna, because Glenna would do that, I believe. Many others don't, and they just give their opinion. And their opinion in many instances is wrong. As a matter of fact, we had a reporter in the Southwest Florida that got a Pulitzer Prize based upon faulty stories, faulty investigations. But she did it the best she could, but she didn't check it out, a lot of the things. And as her series of stories ran, we said, we must respond. We're the PR firm. We represent an insurance association. They said, no, she doesn't know what she's doing. She's trying to hurt us. She's a bad guy. And they were put their head in the sand. So after 3 stories, and they're not listening to what we're asking them to do, we want to set the record straight. We want to give them the facts, or at least try and help her. Didn't happen. She won a Pulitzer Prize a year later, and to this day, and she's no longer with the paper. They still bitch about it, and it was their own fault because they didn't respond. And if the media won't respond, let's say the media doesn't want to listen. Sometimes not all reporters are responsible and want to do their job like they were trained. There are those, and it's the exception. So if you have that, you have other outlets now to try and get your story told. Okay? So it might be a competing newspaper, it might be an insurance journal, it might be your own blog, or it might be social media, it might be through an association. But it's our job to try and get the real story out with the facts. And those should be defendable.
And in a situation like that, when a company is in a crisis and is trying to kind of damage control in terms of their image, how much does a journalist interact with the company itself?
I think that depends on the company. I mean, I am a big fan of, we talked about a lot of this. I don't want messaging and I don't want spin. I just want factual information. So my first call is usually to the top person. And you'd be surprised how many top people take my call. And cuts my time in half. I get the real story. And I appreciate that. And then there are companies who are so fearful of me for no reason. Actually, no one needs to fear me. But they have this sort of idea in their head of the news media is calling, instead of a person who is genuinely trying to find the truth. And so, you'll have to talk to my PR. Listen, I had an instance with this university yesterday. And, trying to find, with no agenda and no horse in the race, trying to find out certain facts and figures. And I got emailed a statement that had nothing to do with what I asked, with an apology from the PR person, who actually is a friend of mine. This is all I could get for you. I'm really sorry. Okay. That doesn't mean I don't have the story, because I got it another way, because that's what I do. But, and I included in my story what I found, good, bad, and ugly, and I just put it out there, and what do you think? And so a company or an entity, companies are private businesses. I respect a company's right to spin their story the way they want. That's what they are. My bigger issue is with public entities, public universities, elected officials, your mayor, your president, your school board, the people who you pay to do good work for your government, for you, are beholden to you. And when they won't talk to me, that's bad.
So Glenna makes the call to the CEO's office, and they say, oh, certainly, can we get your name and number? What we do is we train our clients, if the media calls the CEO's office, and say, confirm who you're speaking with, who do they work for, what's the nature of what they want to speak to me about, and what's their deadline. And we assure them someone will get back to them within an hour.
Deadline no longer applies.
Okay.
Because of social media.
Right. So what we will normally do is I call Glenna and say, so Glenna, I understand you like to talk to our CEO. Can you tell me a little bit? I interview the interviewer, is what I do.
And I wouldn't tell you. No. And I don't say that to be a jerk about it, but if I give a PR person a set of questions, you get to craft all your answers. I want the boss to answer my question. And there is an answer to the question. There is an answer. If the boss can't say answer, it is not news.
So let's bring it back to social media.
Give me a hug.
Can you guys, the students have any
But I agree with
questions
what
about
you did on
social
the
media
statement.
in
It
the
had nothing to
industry?
do with what you asked.
Right.
This question's for Glenn.
Yes, sir.
Since obviously social media has impacted all of us tremendously in this past 5 years, have you noticed a rise or a decline in your viewership when it comes to your live TV shows? And has it been a good thing or a bad thing?
I would say on face value, it's a good thing because news is evolving. You will hear people who have been in the business a long time lamenting how it's so much better before and it's so terrible now. And I mean, there's many more choices. Generally speaking, industry-wide, far fewer people watch a newscast than they used to because there's so many other choices. So I look at the industry evolving just like every other industry evolves. As a positive change, and you embrace that and you go with it. And our positive change is on social media. So, my station has a dedicated social media executive producer who he doesn't. We all do Facebook, we all do Twitter, we all do Insta, we all do Videolish, we all do as much as we can. But that is just as important of an audience as our broadcast audience. So at the very beginning, when we first went online with our website, for instance, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, I kind of lost track of time. Years ago, when we first have, local10.com, I and every other broadcast journalist would write a little story for the web. That's the best ringtone ever. I was ready to do a fire drill over that ringtone. I would go about my business just like I did every day. I'd go, I'd interview, I'd research, I'd craft my story, we'd write, we'd edit it, and after it aired on the 6 o'clock news, I'd sit down, because broadcast writing is very different from print and web writing. So I would sit down and write for the web. And we all did that. And then the management started saying, the web is up all the time. Why would you wait till after 6 to write your web story? And I'd say, I don't know, that's what I do as broadcast. The web was kind of like an afterthought. And then we slowly realized the web is how to get more audience for the broadcast because it's up all the time, as well as, and above all, it is the news source that we are now going toward. So I think you see every broadcast and print entity moving toward web-based dissemination. The problem right now is that there's no way to monetize that as a profitable business because web is free. So I think as far as audience, the basic answer to your question is I don't know. I don't look at ratings. That's for my bean counters. I give 110% every day, whether it sweeps or not. I don't really care what the ratings are other than people are watching. And I know people are watching just based on when I go to Home Depot and people know my name. I know people are watching the news, which is a good thing. I think far fewer people industry-wide are watching, and so I would say social media has absolutely given us a new audience in many other ways. So it's good. It's the way of the future, and you can either embrace it and run with it and love it and be positive about it, or retire.
And the flip side of the coin to that is, in print journalism, the fact is having great visuals or video, the open rate when you have video or great photography is just like off the charts as compared to raw text. And so suddenly they would give a weekend course on how to be a videographer to these print journalists.
Which they all fought.
And they all fought it, and it was disastrous. We have 3 former television journalists on our staff, and we say, do us a favor, either stop doing it or let us come in and show you how you should do it. Because they didn't know how to write for television, and they certainly didn't know how to be a photojournalist. It's not something you learn in a weekend course. So, but everyone's just trying to figure out, as well as management, about what do we do? What's the right balance? And in terms of the advertising, there's plenty of advertising on the web, but it is not at the same cost per thousand or GRP as you get for a television ad. Same with print. What they traditionally got for a print ad in the Miami Herald, the double truck ad with the auto dealer, on the web, it's a lot less money. So they are finding ways to get some income, but it's not making up the difference of either lost readership, subscriptions, or potentially lost viewership.
So to follow up on what you were saying, because as educators of journalists and just advertising and public relations people, that's one of the things where we've had to adapt our curriculum, is to teach those skills that before, in another era of media, there were people that did the video, right? And the journalists didn't do it. And there were people that, and the PR people had to have the relationships and had to write, but they didn't necessarily have to be able to produce other kinds of media. Can you talk about, and you both have addressed this, but maybe can you talk more about, for people that will be future practitioners, how those skills are necessary, how much you rely on other people, and then to, how much they play into our discussion of social media.
May I?
Go ahead.
I will say, the people, Miami's the 16th largest television market. That's big. And it used to be people who worked in Miami had 2, 3, 4 markets under their belt, Paducah and Bozeman, Montana, and it was not an easy market to work in journalistically. Now we're hiring people out of college. And the people out of college that I work with right now are so much better at social media than I am. I'm in awe. It's something you grow up with. Every generation has something that the generation didn't have before that you're wired for. My kids were on the computer when they were 2. And so they're really good at that. And I find that a lot of the really, like the 20 and 30 somethings that I work with are very adept at social media. They're very adept at videotape and editing. To this day, I couldn't edit my own story. It would take me probably 10 hours to edit something that my photographer can do in 15 minutes. So I think technically, people that are younger and coming out of school and at the very beginning of their career, they got that down. And I think if, most universities, if you're going to do a broadcast course, you learn to edit. You learn Avid. You may learn another program. We're on Avid. You may learn another program. I can edit on my iPhone and iPad. That I know how to do. That's pretty simple. And I think these are technologies that you can learn fairly easily just by virtue of having a cultural background and a generational background in knowing that. A touch screen, if you take someone 70 or 80 years old, they practically will understand what a touch screen means, but there's no intuitive, touch screens are very intuitive. You can go on a new program and you can figure it out in 10 minutes, right? That's, as someone who is not that, it's like magic and they don't get it. So the good news is that I think anyone in this room can learn very easily the technology of what to do, be it video or whatever. To me, what I see lacking is not the technology, it's the cultural literacy. I have reporters who knows, wherever you live, who knows who your mayor of your city is? Raise your hand. That's bad. For news. If you're independently wealthy and you're a trust fund kid and you've got $1 million in the bank, you're good. To live as a functioning citizen, an engaged, active citizen in this community, that's what news needs to have more of. And so don't worry about the technology because you've got that already. And curriculum-wise, whatever you teach, chances are in 10 years is going to be old. I learned all I need to know technically my first TV job. But I have an English degree. I know political science. I know who all my elected reps are. I know how government works. I know how nonprofits work. That's what you need to know. That's what you need to get really good at. And for PR, I think just as important, because if you have a wide range of clients, you got to know all of those businesses, how they work, to get a really good grip, to be good at what you do.
Don, how has the skill set evolved for public relations practitioners?
We also need to, just to add on what Glenna said, you need to be a news junkie. And that's what I see lacking a lot of, is just being familiar with what's going on. I read 4 newspapers every day, but I love it. No one has to make me do that.
Print?
Both. Depends. I still enjoy caressing a newspaper if I have one, but we realize that they may be gone in a year or two. But just the news and being familiar, it makes you a more interesting person, and you learn. The other thing you need to learn in the PR profession, what I see lacking quite often, is the fundamentals of business. So if you're representing businesses, you need to understand business. So taking some core business courses, a core marketing course, general business. Business law is very, very good to take. Understanding a little bit about business. An accounting 101 course. Everyone's like, no, don't make me do that. Or finance. That I have a business background, but I understand business. But I had a business report at the Miami Herald, this is years ago, who wrote feature articles. And my client was in a really sophisticated business, and he said, well, we deal with businesses' balance sheets. And she said, what's a balance sheet? She's been a business journalist 5 years. She didn't know what a balance sheet was. Right, it was very odd. And he called me and yelled at me, who do you have interviewing me? The person that has the major feature in the Miami Herald every week, that person. So this was years ago. So being a great consumer of news, seeing a lot of different points of view and styles of delivery that could certainly be online, but also on television, not only the local newscasts, which we try to watch all of them. There are fewer and fewer of them, but the locally produced news shows like Glenna's, they're wonderful. You really learn about what's going on in your community. You're a more interesting person. When you're young, your big disadvantage is that you're young. Your big advantage is you're young. It's both. So if you're going to go and graduate school and you're in your mid-20s and you're interacting with business people, men and women in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, you have to establish yourself that, like, I know what I'm doing. And part of knowing what you're doing is being able to converse with them intelligently, to be able to understand their business and their industry, and to, if you don't, is to really immerse yourself in it and get to know it. And believe me, we worked in every industry you could think of, but you're dealing with healthcare, it's very technical. Legal, it's very technical. Real estate and finance can be very technical, and certainly insurances. But you've got to learn it, and if you don't learn it, then it's going to be obvious and you're not going to do well. The other thing is we just hired an intern this week, Laura, from Miami. And Laura is bilingual. That's something our firm, we've had bilingual people that can not only speak but write well in Spanish. She can. Television background, she edits video, she shoots video, she's been on the air. That's really good. Social media, she's handled social media, and she can write. She's a competent writer. At least we think she is. It's going to take us a while, but she knows some things that the older people, such as myself, that may not know as well. So we brought her in more or less on a 3-month tryout, and she has those experiences that really benefit her. So if there's anything I could recommend, in addition to diversity in your classes you take with your electives, is to have diversity in your experiences and internships. And it's a little touchy for businesses today. I can't, unless it's for credit, I cannot have an intern work for free for us. We ain't doing it. We used to do it routinely.
I'll take them.
And believe it or not, when we take an intern on, some different businesses view interns differently. We view it as a responsibility. So it's not free labor by any. We put just as much in as they do. So we've just always been willing to hire off the campus, which a lot of companies don't do. And we've been willing to bring interns on, especially interns that are not summer interns. We can get all we want in the summer. You can't get them out of season. So, we've hired many of our interns. So internships are really valuable any way you can get them. And just make sure when you interview for an internship that you understand what's expected of you and the kind of experience, just like you do with the syllabus that I have to fill out if I have an intern that works for credit. You want to make sure I know you're excited and everything, but you don't want it to be a bad experience. I've had an intern, was a relative of mine, a PR major. I put her on the phone doing research, and this is 15 years ago. I wanted her to research pediatricians' offices in West Palm Beach. Well, if you ever called the doctor's office cold, even when you're a patient, but you're not a patient, there's not a root or front end of any business that exists. She was traumatized. She finished her major, and she said, I'll never do it again. I said, this was a project. That's not what PR people do all day long, although we do research just like you do. But it traumatized her. So also to be in PR, you have to have good people skills, and you have to have a thick skin, because it's not always easy, especially when you're young. Because some journalists, when you're dealing with journalists, may not have the respect for the profession that maybe we think they should, or maybe they have not dealt with the people that are the good people in the business. I one time ran into an editor of a trade journal in McCormick Center in Chicago, and I was pitching a story, and she asked me questions, and I knew more about it than she did, and I should. I'm being paid to know more than she does. And she said, how come you're not 22 years old? She said, a girl named Amy that doesn't know what she's talking about. I said, because this is what we're paid to do. We're not going to send our people out into a trade show or working with the media unless they are prepared to do that. And otherwise, you're doing them a disservice, and you're doing your client, your company, a disservice.
So I think that what you've said echoes what a lot of employers have told us, is that the skills are important because you want people to hit the ground running, but also just that critical thinking, to really know what's going on in the world, be a consumer of news and information. If you want to create content of news and information, you better know what's out there, different styles, like you said, and just demonstrate, that when you go, just because you're the youngest, you're not the most clueless, right? I think that's very
And plus, you
important.
make a great dinner party guest when you know stuff.
And let's take social media for a second. What happened is, just like with the media, with television, with newspaper, they're all trying to figure out where the equilibrium is, what they need to be doing for their consumer of news. Well, corporations, they're all figuring out, now we have to do social media. Well, go find two 22-year-olds and do the social media, and they don't know what they're doing. And that's what we're seeing a lot of. And they're doing 88 posts a day that are ridiculous. And it's clear they don't know the industry, they don't know the consumer, the customer, and you can't do that.
And there are unscrupulous employers and internship hosts that like to hire students because of their social media and ask them to do things that are inappropriate. So that's where that's where we also need, you as students should make sure you get your experience in places that are going to be good for you, and not people that tell you to post false things on Yelp and things like that. Right?
So today, what you can do is you can see you did a post. It's good, especially if you're not heavily experienced with the client or the company you're working for, is to make sure that there's someone that's going to go and vet and edit and review and give you feedback on what you're writing. There's someone that can you can interview your boss. What are the create almost like an editorial calendar where you have in the can 6 or 7 evergreen kind of posts. And we can all do that. You can do breaking news and things that are happening right now, but there's always room for we need a post, right? So you should always have posts so you're not dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. You should have 6, 10, 12 in the can. So you're not desperate. And you may put yourself in a position to do something without the proper overseeing of your boss, and it might be the wrong thing. The other thing is just looking at the reactions, paying attention to the analytics and the reaction to what you're doing. Just like we're doing a lot of e-newsletters. E-newsletters on Constant Contact and MailChimp are the two most popular. You can look and see how many people open that email. How many people read which article, how many people commented, did our website traffic, did it spike, did it impact the website traffic? So you got to have your hands on all these levers to see what's working. It doesn't matter what someone's opinion is, it doesn't matter what my opinion is, it's what is the marketplace, what is the social, the blogosphere telling you, right? So make sure that you pay attention to the analytics, because when you're a junior person speaking to a senior person, they're going to listen if you can give them the data and the trends as opposed to your opinion.
Any more questions or comments from the audience? So I'll let you close then.
Can I just say thank you? I've been retweeting. You guys rock. Social media rock stars.
So this is it. Basically, I would like to thank you both for a very energetic discussion and for the insight. I'm sure everybody here in the audience got a lot of invaluable information. For those of us that are going to continue in the public relations, advertising, newsroom, journalism, communication careers, I think this is another set of tools or another set of insights that you can carry with you forever.
Can I just say, you all can contact me. I'm very easy to find. I'm happy to help you and answer your questions anytime.
Same
please
here.
do.
Thank you very much.
But if it's after midnight, you can give Glenna those calls.
I'm good. I'm up at midnight. That's fine.